Hello everyone and welcome to Overexposed, a BWRM podcast where we delve into the ins and outs of running a real estate photography and videography business. My name's Dave Temple.
And my name is Jackie Kirk, and our guest today is a former Irish Navy man who spent 16 years living the life of adventure at sea. Today he's Managing Director at Integrity Professional Development, and he's helped many of our members break through their fears and preconceptions about what it means to be a salesperson and to go on and succeed in their business. Welcome, Bob. We are delighted to have you here today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's, as you rightly say, I've enjoyed working with many of your colleagues over the last number of years, so delighted to be invited to participate.
So, Bob, take me back a little bit, because right now you're running our sales course, but you started your journey to this in the Irish Navy. Is that right?
Yes, I'm not sure do people on the podcast see images, but if you did, you'd see I have a lot of grey hair. So it was quite some time ago. My first call it a job was I was in the Irish Navy for 16 years. So that was from 1981 through to 97. And yes, as you say, a life of adventure. Obviously, most of my life at sea. I was also a diver in the Irish Navy. We did a lot of underwater explosives and things like that. And way back then in the year 2000, I got involved in this space that I'm now in, which is professional development. And now, as you know, me running Integrity Solutions here in Australia.
So how did you get involved in professional development? Because correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm imagining this adventurer that loves being outside, and the last thing that person is your typical salesperson. You know, that's someone that just wants to live a very real, adventurous, exciting life. So how did you end up in sales and then in professional development?
That's quite a long story. And I'm not sure if we've enough, if you want to give me enough time to do this, but way back when in the Irish Navy, we had, I guess, a routine a routine where we would spend 2 or 3 years attached to a seagoing ship. So we spent life at sea. And then you had a 2-year rotation when you were ashore. And during my 2-year rotation, I was involved in training both naval officers and non-commissioned officers in a variety of things. Probably the most interesting role I had was an interesting title. I was officer in charge of drug smuggling in the Irish Navy. Now,
of preventing drug smuggling.
Yeah, preventing.
I was about to clarify that. So, way back in the 90s, Ireland's Navy got increased powers to deal with drug smugglers coming into the coast of Ireland. And you may not be aware, but if you can get illicit materials into Ireland, it was reasonably easy to get them into mainland Europe. So quite often people used Ireland as the first stop. So we got increased powers, and I was in charge of training the Navy and how to deal with these increased powers, and also how to deal with, I guess, some of the less desirable things that happen at sea when you're trying to stop people who smuggle drugs. So I got to enjoy that whole space. And then when I decided to leave the Navy, that was a kind of a natural area to look at. And I brought a business into Ireland at the time from overseas called Leadership Management Ireland. And we ran leadership programs, management programs, and also sales programs. And I ran that business in Ireland through to for about 12 years, well, exactly 12 years. And in 2012, I came over here to Australia to run the Australian branch of that particular business, a company called LMA, Leadership Management Australia, or Australasia more correctly, because we had a presence both in Australia and in New Zealand. And I helped the business owners, not unlike the people who are business owners in BWRM, I helped them to grow their business here in Australia and New Zealand in the training space. So yeah, I've been 20 odd years in that space now. I've enjoyed every minute of it. And I guess it also allows me, Jackie, to address your point. I still enjoy a bit of an adventurous life. So I still do a bit of sailboat racing and a whole range of other things as well. So I guess I have the best of both worlds.
Amazing.
just to clarify for me, was the background was, or the attraction was mainly training rather than sales? Did the sales come just from the training, or did you have any sales background?
I had no sales background whatsoever, and I guess this speaks to a lot of the common ground I find between my own past and many of the people who joined BWRM. We typically are attracted to an area that we enjoy, that we're proficient at, but oftentimes the challenge is, how do I go out and sell that? And there's a lot of barriers, a lot of blockages, I think, that stop people or prevent people from looking at that. Who there are barriers, I guess, that people have to get over to be good at promoting what they're good at. So I've lived that struggle myself for quite some time, because as with any business, it doesn't matter how good you are. If you can't get out and promote it and acquire clients, it's not very. It's a pastime rather than a business.
Yeah.
So yes, that's. I hope that makes sense. It's kind of common to many of the people I've met through my interactions with BWRM.
Well, one of the things when we're talking to people when they're thinking about coming on board, the attraction is the idea of running their own business and being able to do something that's sustainable and creative and all of those things. And they're excited about going out and being creative and having, an interesting job. But it's very often that when we say that you're going to need to go out and sell and build up your client base and build up those relationships, that people get turned off, and they either get turned off because they're so overwhelmed and uncertain about what to do and unsure of how to sell, or they just don't like the idea of themselves as a salesperson. I think traditionally when people say salesman or saleswoman, you kind of imagine, someone, a sleazy person knocking on your door trying to sell you a vacuum cleaner. And it's not what it is today. But it's, like you said, it's a barrier that people have internally, I think, particularly for creatives. Have you seen much of that within our network? And how do you address it?
Well, I guess the short answer is yes, I do see it. And if it's any consolation, it's not purely for creatives in the real estate photography area. Many technically proficient people, passionate people about their vocation, their trade, they're turned off by that word selling. And, the cultural identity of a salesperson oftentimes isn't very complimentary, and it's not very strong. We have cliches, we have images of, and if anybody from the car industry is listening to me, please don't take this personally, of the used car salesperson. And it is a mental barrier. Certainly that word carries a lot of baggage with it. And, there are stereotypes that reinforce that. And very often our own view of selling is formed by our own experience of being sold to by certain people. So, yes, I think to address your point, there's that psychological view of selling, a person's view of that element of of what they have to do that oftentimes can be very off-putting. And as a result of that, people don't take on board an opportunity because there's selling involved in it. In fact, it's one of the first things we do in our training programs. Many of your colleagues will attest to this. We ask people, what do you think of when you think of the word selling? When you think of the word salesperson? And I have to say, there's not too many complimentary words come out of people's mouths in that first few minutes. So there is that mental block, I think, Jackie and Dave, that people have to get over. Everybody makes a living by selling something. It's just if we associate selling with how we've seen people do it in a negative way, well, it's very hard to embrace it as part of our role.
So how do you, what is the positive way of selling then? If we know the negative, if we're saying to someone who's got this mental block, imagine someone's listening and just going, I don't want to be a salesperson. I'm a creative. I'm not comfortable. I'm comfortable that I know what I'm doing. I'm not comfortable with telling people that I'm good. What do you say to them of what's the alternative way of selling to what they're imagining?
We start off by defining selling. And our definition and I'll address this in a second, but our definition is selling is identifying needs people have, satisfying those needs, and creating value for them. Now, I'm aware that just putting a new definition on a PowerPoint screen or in a training manual isn't going to change people's perspectives. But the entire process we use in Integrity Solutions is underpinned by that very definition. If selling is just about understanding a real estate agent's needs and delivering on those needs, and more importantly, creating value for them, people tend to see the profession or the function of sales a little bit differently than what historically it has been, which is, and I hope you don't mind me using quite a crude analogy, showing up and throwing up, which is possibly how many people in sales see it. The negative way is I'm just going to turn up in front of a real estate agent and tell them all the things that we can do in BWRM, and there are many. You have a very highly technically modern business. And if this old perception, if I tell them how good we are, well, then maybe they'll do business with me. But we take an alternate view. We develop and train our participants to approach their prospective clients, to gain rapport, to interview them, to get an understanding of their business, what their challenges are, to ask insightful questions. And then, based upon the needs that have been identified by that prospective client, then we'll demonstrate to them how our services can add value to their business. And of course, we have to also build trust. We have to negotiate, and we have to close sales or gain a commitment from a particular client to proceed. So it's a process, Jackie, that we go through over a period of time with all participants. And more importantly, we get them to apply those ideas in real time. There's no role play here. It's really real play. So all of the participants practice these ideas while they're growing their business. And in doing so, they strengthen their attitude towards sales. And more importantly, they grow skills. And I think that's been shown by many of the people I've been lucky to work with over the last couple of years.
That's really interesting. How do you? So that's once you're in the agency, in the actual place that you want to sell to somebody. How do you? Like a lot of the people I've spoken to, if they've come from a photography background, maybe they're going out on their own taking photos. The only person who ever sees the photo is themselves or their family. There are people who've come from technical backgrounds like myself who, it's almost the anti-sales. You don't want people coming to talk to you because that means you've got to do some work. So how do you get people to get over that barrier of wanting to go into a new building and, make that approach? Because that was a really big step for me to be able to walk in and have the confidence.
Well, I'm glad you've mentioned that word, Dave, confidence, because I think that is at the core of most of the issue that you've just mentioned. People aren't confident to do this because they're not sure, firstly, how they're going to be received by a potential customer. And they don't have a process to go through to gain insights into that customer's business and to build rapport and all those things I've mentioned. So as with any area such as confidence, you can't just read a book and become confident. You have to gain confidence over time by practicing things. And for some, that takes a long time. For others, it takes less time. But fundamentally, at the core of what we do, and I hope this addresses your question, is about helping people grow their confidence by giving them, I guess, little successes over a period of time, which in turn boosts not just their ability, but as I said, their self-belief, their confidence, these attitudinal things that make a big difference.
So, Bob, you spoke a bit about how the learning is in real time. I think was that the phrase you used. So that's really interesting to me because I'm sure a lot of people have done courses. We've read the books. We've done the sales course. You go, oh, that's really interesting, and then you kind of move on with your life. What is it that makes this stick? That makes it something that people really change from and learn and grow and makes a big difference to them?
Well, allow me to speak, I guess, to the standard way corporate sales, leadership, management training takes place. And most training is run by very proficient people who stand in front of an audience or possibly behind a Zoom screen, and they present information, in many cases, in a very compelling way. And there's excellent resources, as in manuals, materials, booklets. There's probably really good PowerPoints. It's probably a very enjoyable day. And if you're like me, you've probably been to many seminars like this. And again, if you're like me, you sat there and you said, gee, that's great. That's a fabulous idea. I must put that into practice. I must do that. And that's augmented by the facilitator or the trainer, begging of the audience, please put this into practice. And you fully intend to. But you finish the one-day training, you go back to work, you've got one less day in the week to work now, and for the most part, you don't put that information into practice. The process doesn't work. It's merely awareness building. You might even say it's a day of entertainment. So our process is designed, as you may recall, to run over 8 or 9 weeks. And we get people to put this information into practice, as you said, in real time with their clients, with their prospective customers. And they learn by doing. Years ago, I've stolen this quote from somebody. I wish I can remember who it was so I could give them some credit. But there's an old saying, information without action is merely entertainment. We need to get people to put the information into practice in real time with their clients and to learn by doing. Now that takes time. So oftentimes people aren't patient and they want it to happen very, very quickly. But the most sustainable change in results comes from changing habits. And our process is designed to do just that.
I suppose that also helps build people's confidence as well, because if you're being instructed, 1 week you're being instructed to do this thing and you go and do it, and you've got someone to fall back on and say, hey, I tried this and this is what happened. And, you've got that sort of safety net, rather than if you're doing it on your own or if you just did it over a one-day course, trying to remember all the things is just not going to happen. So you've got that ongoing confidence building by reporting back what happened and finding out what the next thing to do is.
Indeed, Dave, that's exactly right. And to add to that, BWRM have, I would say quite wisely, elected to encourage their people to attend what we call open or public courses. And we have people from a wide variety of different sectors and different spaces, many of them professionals, many of them not. But you learn as much from the other people on the program as you do from the course material, the material, the interactions on a weekly basis. So, there's a course we're running at the moment, and there's somebody from the medical device space on it. They sell medical devices into hospitals. And oftentimes we think that the challenges we have as BWRM are unique to us, that nobody else has them. But when you listen to other people from the medical device space, you find that, well, actually, that's not the case. That person has equal challenges with their confidence, and they could ask better questions and they could deal with objections a little bit better. And I learn from their experience just as much as I do from the course content and from my colleagues in BWRM. So yes, when you add all of those things together, in fact, I only learned the word for that very recently. It's called vicarious learning, which essentially means we learn as much from other people's experiences and hearing their experiences as we do from our own.
I think that's a big part of what we have in BWRM as a network as well. I think we've recognised that in our own communities. We've got people in this business who've been doing this for 15 years, and we've got people that just started. And to be part of a community where they've travelled the same path and probably had very similar challenges has been hugely valuable. It definitely was for me. That was my experience when I started. I had Dave to call up, and when I thought I was stuck, he had solutions because he'd been there.
But to be honest with you, I probably got those solutions from going to conferences where I learned from someone else. So
yeah, exactly. If you surround yourself with people who are actually more advanced than you don't drag them down, they lift you up. And I think that that's something that's also really interesting and another really valuable part of our community.
Indeed, yes. Another thing I might like to add, and again, if it's okay with you, is, while we call it a program, Dave, Jackie, and the audience, to differentiate it from a course. Maybe it's just my interpretation of the word, but a course to me is something you go to for the day, whereas a program is over a period of time. We also add so recalling the people I've worked with in BWRM, this particular area, we call it behavior styles, particularly resonates with creative people. And in quick summary, the fact is that people communicate differently depending on their personality types and oftentimes depending on the role that they have in a business. And I can't say that there's any one specific behavior type that BWRM creatives approach, but I would say it's reasonably safe to assume that the owners of real estate agents are doers. They're very busy people. They're direct. They can be drivers. And oftentimes the people who are attracted to BWRM are not. They can oftentimes be quite techie, controller people, or they can also be very expressive or talkers. So we work quite closely over that 8 or 9 weeks in helping people to adapt their style to the style of the person they're approaching. And kind of like getting people to speak the language of their client. Now, a number of things happen when we do that, not least of which is we strengthen the relationships between ourselves and our clients. People like to do business with people that are like them. So if we can speak their language, we're more likely to develop that relationship, which leads to commercial success, than if we expect the client to adapt to our style. So that's central to our process as well. How can we, as I said, literally adapt and speak in the language of our customer? In doing so, it shows, it has proven from many of your colleagues that it leads to longer standing relationships. And you're the first person they call when they have a need for photography, drone photography, videography, all the various services that you provide.
I really like that because in order to find out what someone's style is, you actually have to listen to them. And that's the first thing in trying to sell something, to listen to what they're actually saying and go from there. So that's good.
But I also think this was another question I had for you. We get lots of people, like you said, joining us, and some are more introverted, some are more extroverted. And I think extroverted people feel a bit more comfortable selling. They don't mind talking to people. But we've also had some people who are creative, but less comfortable talking to a big group of people. And they just kind of think, I'm introverted, I can't sell. Do you have to be a specific personality type or behavior type to be able to do this successfully, do you think?
Well, let me go back to something Dave just said, the importance of listening. So traditionally, in my experience, and it is only my experience, people who are expressive, we use the word talkers. They like to talk. They're oftentimes attracted to sales roles because they get to express themselves. And the irony of that is that the best skill be good at sales is not talking, it's listening. So there's that little contradiction, I guess. So to address your question, Jackie, there are some people, no question, who are more comfortable in expressing themselves. And the people that you've alluded to, the technically adept people, we call them controllers. They're very analytical. They love data. They love numbers. They're introvert. Somebody's put their hand up. They probably have to work a little bit harder to express themselves. But every single behavior style, and by the way, nobody fits neatly into any one box. We all have generally 2, maybe 3 behavior styles that we're most comfortable with. And we always struggle with one. So for example, you might have guessed I'm a talker. Something might have given that away. So I struggle with controllers because we speak a different language. I have never read a contract unless I'm forced to, whereas a controller will read the small print and they will know all the technical data, their cameras, they will know everything about the equipment they have. I'm just interested in what it does. So yes, traditionally, people who are talkers are attracted to sales, but there's a contradiction in terms there. The skill in selling is not talking, it's actually asking questions, shutting our mouth and listening and getting an understanding of what the client values.
I was going to say, is it worth just outlining how many different types are there, Bob?
Well, studies have shown over years that there's typically 4 predominant behavior styles. And probably the most popular way of describing that is what's called a DISC profile, DISC. And I'm sure you've done a DISC profile at some stage over the past, and many of the people listening to this will have done it. I guess the challenge with DISC is that most people don't know what even if they've done the profile, they don't know what those letters stand for. So we use slightly different words to describe the behavior of somebody who has those predominant behavior styles. So we use doer, who is a dominant person, and very often the managing director, CEO of a real estate agent is a doer. They're busy people. They're focused on getting things done. They're oftentimes juggling lots of balls. They're impatient. They want to get results. A talker, like me, is somebody expressive, and Jackie's put her hand up, very oftentimes attracted to roles where they get to express themselves. Marketing, for example, creatives oftentimes are talkers. The downside to them is we talk. We're not very good at listening.
No.
We have supporters, the S, I guess they're, as the word suggests, they like to support people. So you'll traditionally find people in customer service roles are supporters. And then the final letter is the C, the controller, or a person who's focused on compliance, data, intelligence. They're generally quite academic. They can oftentimes clash with people like me and vice versa because we speak a different language. So yes, we spend quite a bit of time over the duration of our program in helping people, firstly, to identify what the style of that person they're approaching is, and secondly, to adapt their behavior to suit that of the customer, the real estate agent, etc.
So many times people speak to other people the way I would want to be spoken to. That's what we're taught from a really young age, is do unto others. But it isn't. It's speak to other people in a way that they will hear you. So like you said, in their language. It's something, so I'm an expressive married to a controller, and it's something we've had to work really hard on, actually, and still do work hard on. But yeah.
It's probably one of the reasons why I've always said that you end up with the customers that suit you. And that's probably one of the reasons that you do end up with the customers that suit you as well, in general, because you do get on and naturally get on.
It's also about harnessing the strengths. So like you said, Bob, if you're an expressive, you're going to be good at connecting with those clients and having the confidence and that sort of thing. And that's your strength. And if you know that, you're going to feel confident in that. And you're also going to know what your weaknesses are and to kind of make sure you shut up sometimes. But then you'll have your controller. And instead of just thinking, oh, I don't like talking to people, I could never do this, to change the whole mindset around that, be like, I'm really, really good at listening, and to focus on that. If that becomes your special trait, it's just the thing that you think held you back ends up being the thing that sets you apart.
That's a really good point.
Okay.
Yes.
One of the other things I think is that a challenge is that, unlike your guy at Device who's selling to hospitals, he's selling to, surgeons and business people at hospitals. We're selling to salespeople. So we're all doing this training. You can kind of assume that they've done this training too, and they can see what you're doing. Does that impact the success? Does it make it harder when you're selling to a salesperson?
That's a good question. My immediate reaction to that is no, it shouldn't, because certainly from where we approach our area is we're dealing with human beings, and human beings at their core, whether they're salespeople or not, at their core, they want to be understood. They want people to come in and firstly understand them. And yes, if they can provide something that adds value to their business, to themselves, by all means, they want those salespeople to present those ideas, those concepts, those products to help them to do their business. But Jackie, and I hope you don't interpret this the wrong way. Right back to a question that you asked at the very beginning related to how people perceive those in sales. Very often, in my experience, people who train people how to sell teach people tricks and techniques that are, I guess, designed to get people to sign a deal, to commit to doing business, etc. And a number of things happen when you use tricks and techniques. Firstly, if you're presenting to somebody like you've mentioned who's already a salesperson, they recognize that straight away. And secondly, the person who has a reluctance to be in sales is going to feel very uncomfortable with themselves tricking or using techniques to get their prospect to do business with them. So we have this saying in our business: selling isn't something you do to people. Selling is something you do for and with people. So there's no tricks or techniques. This is really a human-centered conversation to get an understanding of your customer and all of the things I've mentioned. If we use tricks and techniques, we won't have long-standing professional relationships. And furthermore, people like the creatives you attract to BWRM, they're not going to use tricks and techniques because their values won't allow them to do that. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question properly, but certainly I don't see that selling to a salesperson versus selling to a non-salesperson should be any different whatsoever.
No, I agree with you.
Did that make sense, Jackie?
Yes, it did. And you're also thinking at the core of it, they're a salesperson, but they're not at a salesperson in order to be a salesperson. They're at a salesperson because they're trying to achieve something. So if you're helping them achieve that, it doesn't really matter if you happen to be a salesperson at the same time. We're all business people, we're all running businesses. And I think they respect that. And I think that was kind of going towards the other thing I was asking. We do have people who join us we've got people who join us who are creatives and maybe have no sales experience, are really uncomfortable with the idea of selling, and they see the immediate value in a sales program. But then we also have people coming from other industries who may have previously had some sort of sales training in that industry. And I know that they would get huge value out of it, but it's really hard to kind of show them the value. Have you had much experience with people who come in kind of thinking, I've done so much corporate training, I'm not sure you're going to teach me anything I don't know, that have then had a change of heart?
Well, you're allowing me to blow my trumpet, or our trumpet, a little now. Of course we do. And anybody who's been in any form of commercial business prior to joining BWRM has probably had some exposure to sales or business development training. Hopefully they have. And yes, I'd be lying if I said some people don't come in saying, I've done all this before. Why should I invest time in doing this? Well, like anything, firstly, every professional needs to refresh. Kind of like here in Victoria, Jackie, I think you're in Sydney, but in Victoria, you might have heard that we're big into this sport called AFL. I've had to learn about it since I moved here. All of those teams practice the basics every week. They go right back to the basics, and because they're now in a new role, or they're playing a new match, to use a football analogy, those basics have to be used in a different context. So it's always very relevant to undergo sales training yet again, even if they've heard of the concepts before. Secondly, I'm not sure what percentage you would give to the value of mindset versus skill set in sales, in being a salesperson. I mean, I've heard many people say that mindset is by far the strongest attribute to have in selling. Skills matter, of course they do, but they need to be built on a foundation, as it were, of mindset. So what makes us quite different, and I can talk about it all day, people have to experience it, is we focus very much on the mindset side of things. The things we've mentioned: confidence, self-belief, values, a commitment to activities, a belief in our product and service. And all of these things, I think, differentiate us from other sales training programs. Because if we can get the mindset elements strengthened or get them to operate more efficiently or in alignment, we tend to find that people are a lot more motivated to go out and practice the skill sets that they develop. So I'm jumping around a bit, but to answer your question, yes, we certainly have people who say, I've done this before, and that's factual. They have done sales training before, but the context in which they've now joined BWRM probably is different from the context in which they did sales training in their previous career or their previous role.
I was just going to say, actually, about the difference in mindset when you're working on your own business versus working in someone else's as well. Because, I would imagine, I haven't done sales training in a corporate sense, but, if you're going on a course, you've got 5 other people from the same business with you and it's not really your thing. And, like you said, it's a bit of entertainment for the day. Maybe some tips go in and then you move on and you get on with your life. Whereas if you're starting a business and it's all reliant on you, it's your business, and the way that you get work is using these techniques, you're going to start to use them or you're not going to succeed, essentially. So that's a mindset change straight away, surely.
That's an excellent point. That's really good. You're dead right. Sense of ownership when you're running your own business is clearly different than when you're an employee of a company.
The emotion attached to it, the emotion towards the wins and the losses is just so much more intense.
Well, for meeting your people we've worked with over the last while, now for sure people are attracted to BWRM. They're attracted to it because there's a commercial reason to join the business. But every single man and woman I've met also has a deeper, almost like a calling or a vocation to join BWRM because they have a passion for still, video, photography, etc. And I hope I'm speaking correctly here. While it's important that they get a financial return, the primary motivation to join, or certainly one of the primary motivators, is to practice their what they love to do. And you're dead right, Dave. Now they're looking at selling from a totally different context. It's all very well to be passionate about what I do. I have to be able to go out and promote it. I have to be able to approach people who might do business with me, and I have to be able to deliver value to them, and I have to be able to generate long-term, commercially strong relationships with people. You're right. I hadn't thought of it that way until you said it. You do look at things differently when you're self-employed.
Yeah, and it's definitely, like you said, it's about taking something that you love and saying, I love doing this, and honestly, if I could, I would do this for free, but how do I turn this into a sustainable business? And that's sort of what we spoke about at the beginning. It's a huge mindset shift to go from I'm a creative and I just want to do this amazing thing and that I enjoy doing, to I'm a business owner, I'm a salesperson, I'm trying to build something that I can continue to do long term that's sustainable. So perhaps it doesn't make sense for me to edit all my images anymore, for example, even though I love kind of doing those little details. But in order for me to do this long term and not have to go and get an office job at the same time, I need to think about it as a business owner and a creative. It's definitely something we push.
Really well put.
So that's the other thing that I was also going to ask you for. We have a lot of people who do the course who are, say, green. They they're learning how to shoot, they're learning how to sell, they're learning all these things. So there's huge value. But then I've also seen people go on the course and have huge success who've actually been running real estate photography businesses for many, many years. And I've noticed, particularly, I actually sat down, there's a member who's probably been doing this a bit longer than I have, to be honest. He's been doing this, I don't know, about 10, 12 years. And we went into an office together for a sales meeting, and he's built a successful business. He knows how to build relationships and sell, but he's also completely shifted how he does this. And I was in sales meetings with him previously, like a few years back, versus the one I was in with him 2 days ago. And it was just chalk and cheese from the confidence when he walked in to sitting down, doing the interview, building a genuine relationship and rapport. And honestly, I've never seen such an easy win on a sale, to be honest. Like it felt like he wasn't selling anything. And the client said, yeah, no, don't worry, we intend to use you on everything. It was just a testament to this program, that it's not just that here's how to learn it when you're new. It's something that applies to people who've never sold, to people who've had training, to people who've built successful businesses. It just seems like everybody who's done it has gotten such enormous value out of it. So, yeah, I'm blown away by it.
I can add to that as well, in that I think one of the things that happens when you're running your own business and you have to learn as you go is that you get stuck in in ways of doing things. Maybe you said something once and that worked, and so you keep doing it because maybe it will work again. Whereas if you've got reference points that you can come back to, there's an actual program, you can talk to people in other industries, and learn from them vicariously. See, I listened.
Well done.
And get the ideas from them, and you're always coming back to a set of sort of shared ways of doing things. Then you don't just go off on your own and make it up as you go along. There's a structure in place, which I think is really important.
I'm very glad you've mentioned structure, Dave. Yes, so we do promote a structured approach to having an organized sales conversation with your customer. Now, the word structure sometimes conjures up in people's mind, you have to go by a robotic structure. We have to. These are some of the questions you must ask, and you must ask them verbatim. Nothing could be further from the truth. A structure is important because you can follow a structure, but it has to be based upon your personality, your style. Nobody would suggest, for example, that you should say a certain sentence. It has to be a sentence that, as it were, sounds right or sounds comfortable coming from your mouth. It's very important that people don't have to be somebody other than who they are to be good at sales. Sometimes sales training, we say to people, no, you have to change who you are to be good at selling. I don't believe that to be the case. We're all very good already at communicating with people. So how can we tweak that a little bit, have a more structured approach to dealing with our customers and to sound more like the person you've mentioned in your example, Jackie, to have a very natural conversation that really is just a chat with somebody to get an understanding of what they're looking to do and to see if we can do business with them.
It takes the pressure off it, doesn't it? If you've got kind of structure to go back to, it takes away that element of fear. I've gone into meetings before where you're just kind of thinking, don't know how this is going to go, and you're not in the driver's seat. And I think just having that structure then leads you towards that confidence that they will then have faith in you because you're going in there, you're leading that sales meeting, you're asking questions, you're in control, and that already sets you up as a trusted advisor and all of those things that we want to become. So just the way that you're doing it before you've said anything, regardless of the content of what you say, has made them want to work with you because you know what you're doing.
Yeah. I'm going to steal that statement you just made, Jackie. Having a structure gives you more confidence. That's exactly my experience.
Yeah, it does.
When we have something to fall back on, we're never worried. What's next in an interaction with a client? I know what's happening next. Yeah.
I know I get out of bed faster when I know what I'm going to wear. There's no wondering of procrastinating. You know what I mean? Where you're just not sure what you're going to do and what you're going to say. Those are the things we procrastinate on. Is not knowing what you're going to do. And that's why you kind of put it out of your mind. But if you've got a plan, it's pretty easy to then just follow the steps.
Well, particularly if you get the result that you were expecting in the first place, then it all reinforces itself and you just carry on. So question for you, Bob. What would you say to someone, like we speak to people all the time who are interested in coming on to the BWRM program and or as a business. And one of the big steps is when you say to them, you're in charge of running your own business, you're in charge of going out and getting your own work. So if I'm listening to this, sitting in an office somewhere and in a technical or non-sales role, and I think I can't do it because, I'm an introvert and that's not my thing, but I really like photography. I mean, what would you say to that person to change their mind?
Well, first I'd be upfront and I'd say, if I was asked to try and sell the value of BWRM and say, from what I know about BWRM, we as a company are going to remove a lot of the obstacles, the time obstacles that prevent you from growing your business. You'd have heard of the terms high payoff activities. So I would suggest that people need to prioritize the things that grow their business. BWRM recognizes that it's challenging for creatives who are taking on a self-employment role. It's quite challenging. And the evidence backs this up, that one of the big concerns that you have, rightly so, is how do I go out and get business? Now, we will help you through lead generation, I presume, with BWRM, but we also provide a tried and tested program, which we have found to be quite successful, that helps people overcome the mindset issues that are barriers to being successful in sales.
Yeah, I think it's important for people listening to know that BWRM doesn't actually make anything off the sales program. So I don't want people listening to this to think we've got you on and we're trying to, just group this thing. We have you on because this stuff works. We've watched people join, be terrified of selling or just really uncomfortable about it, go through the program and done complete 180s and just go on to thrive. And people that, barely spoke in our member workshops initially who are now, flying, they're doing loads of work, they've got great customer relationships. So I think it's really important for people to know that this isn't a pitch. We're talking to Bob, or we have Bob involved because it works. And we don't work if our members are successful, and we've seen that this makes them successful. So we've got that vicarious learning through our community, but then there's additional mindset change and really kind of like an intensive learning exercise that will help you turn what you probably thought was your weakness before into your biggest selling strength. And that should cut through those barriers.
That's really good. Yes, that's a good way of putting it. Jackie, Dave, everybody, everybody who sets up their own business, they have to go get clients. Unless you have a product that's unique in the marketplace, you're not going to be inundated with phone calls in your first week. You have to go get them. And as you rightly say, there are barriers there. And this is one of the many initiatives that you and BWRM have to support people, to help them get over those concerns and to be successul in the business. And I'm conscious, as I'm saying it, I sound like I'm putting in a pitch.
You can join us if you want.
Well, if I may say so, Dave and Jackie, you're the only company I work with that provides this or recommends this resource to its people. The fact is that your success is directly related to the success of the creators who join.
Yeah.
Everybody wins when they sell more.
Well, I think because we're not a franchise and there's no franchise fees, it's the only way that BWRM is able to operate and continue to exist is if our members are successful. So everything we do is about taking that person and putting them in a path and giving them as many resources as possible to succeed. And I think the other thing that's really important is that we've all been there. You've grown 3 businesses from scratch in 3 different states. I've done it twice. I had no sales training either, none at all. I used to drink 2 really strong coffees first, which now, having learned that as an expressive was probably the last thing I needed to do, was to go in even more wired. But we've all had, those really hard moments where you think, I can't do this, and they're just not hearing me. And we've had to find our own way in a way that suits our personalities. So I think, God, I wish I'd had a resource like this 10 years ago when I was like crying in my car after the last door was slammed in my face. Honestly, this would have been amazing. I guess, Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, but at the beginning we kind of spoke about the sense of adventure. And initially the idea was you've gone from this adventurous life and then it's a salesperson role or a training role. But actually kind of over this conversation, I've become quite excited to sell. And as we were talking, Dave, about when it's your own business and you're doing all those things and winning those clients, it's those highs and lows, which I'm sure aren't quite the same as doing underwater explosives. But it's still a pretty good rush when you close that deal and when you make that sale. So I definitely think there's something there that adds that element of excitement and that you help us to achieve. So thank you. Thank you very much, Bob, for coming on. We've been delighted to have you. It's been wonderful talking to you. It's nice to have a lovely Irish accent on the podcast as well.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Bob.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.